as well.
Recording in progress.
Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back to the very last live session for HSP Extrovert Awareness Week. And I think this is a really cool session to finish on because for those of you who've been following this week, you would have seen that I've done a success stories series, and this is the final of those success stories. So I'm joined here by my very special guest, Melody, and we're going to talk through her adventure, I suppose, to start to become an evolved HSP. So for those who haven't heard me use that term, what I mean by evolved HSP is somebody who lives more in the strengths of being a HSP because they've learnt to overcome some of the challenges that come with being HSP. So there are a certain number of challenges that exist simply because we live in a world that isn't set up for our brains or our nervous systems to thrive. But other challenges come from depending on our childhood. So those of you who followed me for a while or know much about HSPs will know that we have a thing called Vantage Sensitivity. So anybody who has had a less than ideal childhood as a HSP is going to be more damaged than a non-HSP with the exact same childhood. The flip side of that, though, and the positive part of that is, though, that if you do the work and we also respond better to positive interventions and positive experience as well, which means that if you do commit to doing the work, you will reap the rewards and the benefits much faster and much more pronounced than non-HSPs, because non-HSPs also have work to do. Most people have crap in their upbringing or in their past that they need to do the work to overcome. But the advantage for HSPs is this Vantage sensitivity, which means that we flourish much quicker, which I think is amazing. So that's why I encourage all HSPs to do the work, because it's worth it. And that's why I asked these ladies to come along and share their story today, so that they can, I suppose, encourage you or inspire you to perhaps commit to doing some more for yourself. So thank you, Melody, for joining me. The first thing I wanted to ask you is, when did you learn that you were HSP extrovert, and what kind of impact did that then have on you, knowing this new information?
Well, in February, probably, I watched the Sensitive on Netflix. It's like a documentary that was made by Elaine Aron, and it features Alanis Morissette, who's a Canadian singer. Um, and I had never heard of HSP before, but I watched the documentary because Facebook recommended it for me. And and I was like really surprised, but not surprised in a way. I was just really excited that there had been some science behind the discovery of this trait, and that it wasn't, psychology, mainstream psychology, talking about how to develop resilience or some other, trendy word to describe how to overcome challenges when you are sensitive. I've always thought that I feel things more deeply than other people, but then I've also thought, well, that's kind of arrogant for me to assume that, because I don't live in somebody else's experience. Maybe other people do feel things as intensely as I do, and they just handle it better. Um, and of course, growing up, I was always told that I was too sensitive, I was too this or that, or not enough of something. And my mother contributed to that, but she also would say something that really stuck with me right into adulthood. And that was, "You're so spunky, Mel. Like you just do it. And even though when things are hard, like, you just overcome and keep going, and you never give up." And she always said that she admired that about me. And I was always really confused about that because I just thought, well, what else am I supposed to do? Um, and she died 8 years ago. And since she died, that's really been a missing piece in my life, having her encourage me in that way, or recognize that I have had challenges and that I can, keep going even when things are really hard. So, um, so that kind of stuck with me. And through the documentary, I thought, oh, this is what she was talking about. And this is me. And now I understand why, even in the workplace, I function differently than other people. And in my career, I've always been told, you are amazing with your patients, like you have a gift of being able to educate and connect with people. Um, but you have some problems socially, like you, you're too much information, or you're just a little much, right? And so that was always really discouraging for me. But I realized that, okay, this is what is going on. And so it was a big relief to realize that I'm not, damaged or flawed because of this, and that there are ways to use these qualities to benefit myself and the people around me in relationships. And it doesn't have to mean a life of suffering or like solitude, isolation. And as far as being an HSP extrovert, that was really part of what was a huge revelation to me after joining the group, because I thought I was introverted. I had hidden away myself for so long in fear of being too much for other people, or too intense, too overbearing. And so I really scaled back my extroversion and I just kept it all inside. And but it doesn't really make sense, because when I look back on my life, like I was always the one making a speech or dancing on the desks, or like just really loving life and being very bubbly and extroverted, outgoing. People used to call me, and they used to say that, like, oh, you're so strong, and you don't have any fears, or you don't have any anxieties when it comes to other people. You just get along. But that's not true. Like, it you, that's how extroverts come across. We come across as being um, unshakable or strong, outgoing, but really inside we're just as nervous and anxious as everybody else. We just
Yeah,
wear it all on our sleeve
yeah,
when we're
yeah.
just
And I
really
think
out there.
I just want to pick up on a couple of really good points that you made. So first of all, that point is that I think that's potentially a big difference between HSP introverts and extroverts. Is I think the extroverts, we do tend to come across as strong and having it all together, and I think our extrovert side helps us to kind of portray that. But as you say, really inside we're big softies and we're feeling the feels all the time, no matter whether we're kind of putting on a brave face or not. And I think I did a video on that just for those that are interested and who are in the group. I called it "What About the Strong Ones?" So that's
Mhm.
essentially all about that, is don't assume that your strong friend does have it all together all the time, because quite often we don't, and that's just the mask that we're wearing for the world. And the other couple of points I wanted to touch on is your mum's use of the word spunky, because I think that is really, really cool, because I was just talking about in the live Q&A session about our inner rebel, and I think that's another thing that
Yeah.
HSP extroverts have, which makes us pretty cool, is we are spunky, or another way of saying that would be our inner rebel. And I think that's one of the things that draws people to us as well, because they sense that about us. But then the other things that I think you were saying would totally relate. So anybody watching this who isn't sure whether you're HSP extrovert, I think Melody just described the whole kind of experience of what you're probably going to be thinking or having been accused of, like whether you've been accused of being too sensitive, also too much. That's a big one. We've all felt like in many occasions we're too much, or we've said too much, we've overshared, and the other person's kind of going, whoa, what's going on here? So if you felt any of that, I think that's a really big sign that you are a HSP extrovert. And I think the other thing that's very confusing for a lot of HSPs is they do think they're introverts, because you said you felt that way. And I know I was listening to the final section that I'm going to release today of the, I was saying in my last video, I broke up my HSP Extrovert Discovery info session. I broke it up into smaller chunks to help you guys share it with your friends and family, so it's more consumable, I suppose. Rather than saying, sit down and watch this 90-minute video, you can say, hey, can you just check out this 10-minute clip? And I was just watching that one, and Terry's on there asking a question, essentially saying that same thing. She felt that she was introverted for most of her life. So that's where, because I think when you add HSP to the mix of an extrovert, we can often feel like we're introverts. So I think that's a really good point that I just wanted to pick up on. So I love that you kind of discovered it, and that you had the experience that most of us have had, which is kind of like, oh, this is why I am like I am, and it's a thing. There isn't anything wrong with me. I think that's the experience that most of us have had, which is really cool. So you mentioned that you found, it was when you found the group that you kind of really cemented, okay, yes, it's extrovert that I am. So yes, HSP from the documentary, but then HSP extrovert from the group. So how have you found, how has it helped you being a part of the group? And this is the free group, by the way. How has that just helped you in your life?
Well, it's a place where we can learn things that are based in science, but also to connect with other people that have similar ways of thinking. It's a place where, like, I enjoy reading posts from other people who have their own life experiences, because the way that the thought process goes, I relate to it. And so it's like a running dialogue that, is mirrored in my own head. And so that really is validating for, believing that, okay, well, it doesn't, I'm not wrong. There are other people like this. We just have been silenced or suppressed for a lot of our lives. And so we don't share this really with other people, because they've made it clear that they don't understand, and they don't really care to understand. So that was really beneficial. And just being part of the group, and the engagement with the other ladies in the group. And then I guess the biggest benefit initially was when Jen ran her boundaries challenge in the spring. I was already part of the Facebook group. I was already on, but I hadn't really engaged. I was just kind of watching, seeing what was going on. Because I do have, my past experiences. I'm not really sure what to make of people initially. I was in a place where I was really feeling that I couldn't trust very many people, and I didn't really know what the whole group was about. So I just was kind of watching. And then Jen ran a boundaries challenge, and one of the biggest things that I've always known is a problem for me is having healthy boundaries, setting them, and then maintaining them. Um, and that's for a lot of reasons, partly because I just want to please everybody. And a big part of that is because my childhood was relatively chaotic. I had a very toxic um, parental figure and relationship modeled for me. And being highly sensitive, that affected me very deeply. And I didn't know how deeply that affected me, but I have always known that I'm pretty codependent, and that I really struggle with boundaries. And because of my life circumstances and over the last year, an area of my life that I really wanted to um, really kind of try and fix some of that or just make it better is in my marriage. And so I thought, oh, this is a perfect situation for me to try and figure out how to implement some healthy boundaries in this relationship that up until now has been fairly toxic. And we are both in a situation where we are making huge changes in our relationship and in ourselves. I'm doing a lot of personal growth work. My husband's doing a lot of personal growth work, but neither of us has any concept of what a healthy relationship looks like. So let's try and start with the boundaries. And it was so beneficial right at that time in my life. And it, just basically changed the trajectory, or it didn't change it, but it propelled me forward in the next thing that needed to happen in my own personal growth and in my relationship. So yeah, that's pretty much the biggest thing that I can think of.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
And I also have to say that just last week, and I haven't shared this with the group yet, but I really need to because I think you guys would just really love it. But um, we had another issue with boundaries, my husband and I. And I, in the moment, he was trying to bait me into giving him some kind of emotional reaction or, engaging with him. And I just firmly said, no, this is not my problem. This thing that you're feeling right now is about you, not about me. And I'm not going to engage with this. And I grounded myself in the ground. I pushed it away energetically, and I refused to engage with him. And he ended up baiting me into the point where I did give him a bit of a rant, but it was over. And he was so confused. And it's taken about a week and a half, but I think today he finally was like, oh, now I understand what you were doing there.
I love it.
And yeah, it's really I'm really encouraged because without having gone through that initial boundaries challenge, that wouldn't have even been a thing for me. It would have just been a yelling match that dissolved into tears for someone, and
Mm-hmm.
we would have had to make up for saying something nasty instead of just trying to come back to the problem
Mm-hmm.
rationally.
Love it. And thank you for sharing that last bit, because that was going to be my question, is how would it have gone before you learnt the boundaries challenge? So can you just share what what was it about the boundaries challenge that you think enabled you to, in that moment, kind of change, instead of reacting the way you normally would, which would be fall for the bait? What do you think was the shift that enabled you to actually go, no, this is a situation where I'm going to do it differently?
It's really hard to say. And I think that this goes back to what you were just saying about vantage point and the ability of HSPs um, to learn and grow and make changes, even when their entire foundation is challenging from childhood. Because just doing the exercises, doing the 5 days, and what I loved about it was that the videos were, short little videos. The assignments were pretty well, they were manageable. They weren't long pages and pages of writing. And it was a stepwise process where you just took a little piece each day and then put it together in the end. By doing it that way, um, I think it just really internalized for me. And I don't think that there was ever a point where it was like, ha, yes, I've got it. Now, the next time he does something, he violates a boundary and tries to make me violate my boundaries, um, I'm going to be good. There was never any moment where I was like, okay, I got this. But but the exercise itself, and then, just trying to keep on the same path of understanding myself, living according to my values, honoring my qualities as as an HSP, and practicing, um, how to communicate better, both my needs with my loved ones, but also in difficult situations. It was just like, this is a boundary. It's there. And yeah, it didn't take any kind of mental effort on my part. It was just like, this isn't happening, and we're
Yep.
not going to go there.
So
So
it's almost
yeah,
like everything you've done kind of has, the shifts have been that kind of, I suppose, internalized, that now this is just almost your new way of being. So you don't
fingers
actually have to
crossed.
go, yeah, you don't actually have to go, oh, now this is this and this is this and
Right.
this is what I have to do. It's kind of, you started
Yeah.
to incorporate it into just who you are. And you
Yeah.
say fingers crossed. And one thing I will mention about that is, please don't beat yourself up. Anybody watching this, either do not beat yourself up if you have a slip up, because these things are not necessarily easy, and it is a process and it is going to take time. But yeah, thank you for sharing that story. I think that's really cool to just hear the shifts that are they're starting to happen in your life, and you're starting to, as I mentioned at the beginning, really reap the rewards and the benefits of doing the work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what you did in the free group. So what are some of the things that you've committed to as part of your personal development? So for example, coaching, BWRT, connection
Hmm.
corner, what are some of those things, and yeah, how has that helped? Or actually no, first of
Well,
all, why did you choose to take it to that next level, is probably the best question.
okay. Well, that goes back to last summer. So not just the summer that's passed, but in 2020. There were a series of events that happened fairly rapidly, um, that were catastrophic in multiple areas of my life. So my marriage, my family with my children, and my career, my work. And when all those things happened, when the last thing happened, which was with my work, and I felt like my entire world collapsing. Um, oh, and my father too. So yeah, that was the last one. I finally just said, like, okay, this isn't normal. Th like, this kind of existence is not something that I just need to accept, which is kind of how I'd been going through life for the last several years. Like, oh, well, okay, I guess it's another thing. Um, and so there must be something about me, or about the types of people that I engage with or that I have relationships with, that create a vulnerability to this sort of event happening. And I don't want this drama in my life anymore. So I'm going to figure out what it is that is making me vulnerable, and I'm going to fix it, because I'm done living like this. I just don't want it. And so I committed at that time to therapy. So I've been in therapy since. I connected with the um, children's mental health and family development organization. I live in Canada, so it's like a social services, and I reached out to them for help for my kids, and they offered me some one-on-one parenting coaching. So I did a series of classes on attachment theory, which was so beneficial for me with my kids, but also really opened my eyes to what went on in my own childhood, and helped me to kind of, um, I guess, release the blame that I put on myself for what went on in my home. So that was really freeing. And and then when I found the group, the free group, and was kind of watching, I did the boundaries challenge. Um, I had the opportunity through that to join Connection Corner, and I thought, okay, this is the part of all of this that I haven't really tapped into, and that's the group part of like trying to have connection and learning about myself and being supportive to other people, making myself vulnerable, but also, learning how to have strength. And so I thought, oh, well, this is just like group coaching, which is kind of the one thing that I hadn't engaged in and hadn't really thought about. So I jumped at that opportunity, and so I'm part of the Connection Corner now, which meets every week, but because I'm on the west coast of Canada, I only go every 2 weeks because it's kind of the middle of the night the other 2 weeks. And so doing that work and doing the readings and participating in the group, and even like I know I missed last week because I was just totally overwhelmed, but um even going when you haven't done the homework, or you feel like you're at your wit's end, is very beneficial, um just to be part of that group and to you know hear other people and their insights. And even though we're all like HSP-E and we think in a similar way, I love to hear how other people explain things too, because it's all the same thing, but it's different than maybe how I would have worded it. And I like to get that. So I have all these aha moments when people speak, because um, it makes sense to me, but also it's maybe a slightly different perspective than my own.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I love that, yeah, just on Connection Corner. So, one of the things that I have tried to do is price it in a way that if you haven't done the homework or you miss a session, then it's not kind of like, oh my God, I'm wasting my money. So, I've tried to price it in a way that even if you can only
Mhm.
come every once a month, it would still be kind of worth the cost.
Yeah,
And the thing I suppose I wanted to ask is because I
yeah.
think from memory, you did you win? I think in the Boundaries Challenge, I think you won maybe 3 months free in Connection Corner. So
Mm.
what was it about it, I suppose, that you decided? Because obviously you get the 3 months, and then if you want to stay, you got to start paying. So what was
Mhm.
it that I suppose made you think, yep, this is worth continuing on, and obviously investing in it, because at that point it was going to cost you money.
Mhm. Well, I think it's good value for one thing. If you were to do other group therapy, it's the cost is comparable, or quite a bit less. I think it depends on how you calculate it. If you're going 4 weeks in the month, then obviously it's great value because it's like a quarter of the cost of what it would be to pay privately for a group session. But I think the biggest thing is just that there isn't a whole lot out there about HSPs. It's still, people still have not heard of what this is. And so to have a group where everybody has kind of found this and we all relate to this, and there's science behind it, and we can use the science and we can use our HSP qualities to grow together. I just think that it's so much more effective than maybe meeting on a Zoom, or in a room with a bunch of other people that have some similarities, like maybe we're all depressed or maybe we all have trauma or whatever. But to be able to like work through these personal growth subjects with other HSPs, I think is so valuable, because we're all on the same level and we're all going at the same pace. And um yeah, like I guess for me, like my mind really goes, and my mouth really goes. I like to talk. Being an extrovert, I process by speaking lots of times, and so do the other ladies, and that's okay. So I like that we, accept that about each other and ourselves, but also it's just like, you know, uh, if if my mind isn't going down a certain track, or, in a thought process, it kind of goes off into never land. And then I lose a lot of the value in whatever the subject is that we're learning about or we're sharing about, because I'm like half in and half out. But when I'm in connection corner, I can't let my mind wander because I'll miss something. And we're all kind of just going in that direction and at that pace. So that I find that really valuable.
I love I love that, and I love that that's something that you've noticed as well. Because yeah, it's not something I've kind of, I suppose, thought about. But yeah, that's really cool that you think, oh, I've got to stay in because I don't want to miss what's going on. I think that's
Yeah.
really cool and really motivating. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. Now, in terms of the shifts and the transformations that you've noticed, so obviously you mentioned that you've been doing therapy, you did the boundaries challenge, you're in connection corner. So as a result of, I suppose it's a combination of all of those things, what shifts or transformations, wins, successes have you noticed since kind of starting this personal development stuff?
Well, I feel a little awkward being called a success story because I don't really feel like I'm a success story yet. But I feel like I'm on the verge of realizing my potential in this world on a day-to-day basis, not just like some grandiose thought of like, oh, I'm going to do this amazing thing, or I have this lofty goal that I'm going to work to achieve. It's more like being myself, being genuine and authentic as much as I can throughout my days, connecting with people, um, and you know, giving them something. And by people, I mean like, so I work in healthcare and I work with the public. So I meet strangers all the time and have, quite intimate conversations frequently. And so part of my goal, I guess, is just to really connect for real with these people and to give them something, even if I have nothing to offer in the way of medical advice or education, just to be that person that they needed to talk to right at that moment in time. And they can go away being a little bit better than they were before. And being a good mom, working on healing my marriage, which still needs a lot of work, but we're both invested. Um, so I feel like I'm on the verge of it. Like I haven't quite figured it out where my place is and how to do all these things, but just living my life every day with this knowledge that it's okay that I think differently than other people and I behave a little bit differently than other people and I notice things differently than other people. Um, I feel like it's leading me, or I used the word propel earlier. I feel like it's kind of propelling me into that life that I would have always wanted, which is just to like be my best self and to help other people and um, raise good, healthy children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful, and it's such a HSP thing that you said about that desire to leave people better than you found them, essentially, when you're having
Mhm.
a conversation with them. And because there's a lot of the population that just would not even contemplate that as being a thing that they would like to do.
Mhm.
So I think that's such a beautiful aspect of being HSP extrovert. And I just wanted to address the whole reluctance to be a success story, because I
Mhm.
think one of the things I wanted to clarify for everybody is, for me, I suppose being a success as a HSP, or this whole concept of success stories, for me, I think it's about, to say a corny saying, it's not about it's about the journey, not the
Yeah.
destination. And I kind of feel like that's what it is for HSP extroverts. It is about, well, all human beings, I think, I believe, can do better with personal development and growth. But I think for HSPs, because we can reap so many rewards and benefits relatively quickly from those positive interventions because of the Vantage sensitivity, I feel like it's just committing to do the work. I almost feel like you're already a success story. The minute you commit and you go, right, I'm going to do this, whether it be therapy, counseling, coaching, a group coaching thing, even just joining the group and doing the free training, I still feel like you're on the way, because that's the best thing you can do for yourself, is to just keep learning and growing. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because I honestly believe that HSP extroverts in particular have the opportunity to change the world and leave it a better place than we found it, just because of all the things that you've just been describing. The fact that we care about leaving somebody feeling better than we first found them, whether they be a close friend or a stranger. I think that's just a beautiful aspect of us. And I think it's beautiful to speak to all of you guys who have children, and the fact that you're so invested in change, like not repeating the mistakes of the past and doing everything you can to raise healthy children. I think that's just so beautiful, and it's such a big part of being HSP is the desire to do that. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify the whole success story thing, because I do honestly believe that it is more about the decisions you're making and the commitments that you're making to yourself that almost kind of tip you into what I would say would be a success story, rather than you've kind of made it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, a lot of the things that we've talked about in the group, in Connection Corner, like living according to your values, you know, deciding what's important to you, and kind of putting aside other people's expectations for performance or even behavior. I mean, you do have to behave yourself, but but like how I communicate or how I interact with people. I don't have to fall into this mold that I thought I did. And I'm realizing that more and more. I'm lucky that I'm, you know, 15, 16, 17 years into my career where I have the confidence where I can just do that. And I can say, okay, well, this is how I was taught, but that doesn't really work for me because I'm different than other people. And I can see that the connection that I have with people goes deeper than than this surface interview, asking a certain set of questions and, you know, creating a plan and carrying it out. And so if I can provide care for people in a way that is meaningful to them and creates lasting change for them and their health behaviors or medication compliance or whatever it might be, then I'm going to do it the way that works for me because it does work. And if it's a little bit different, that's okay. The results will speak for themselves. So that's my career, but it's like I feel like part of the success is identifying what went wrong for me individually and in the world. And being an HSP, these things affect us very deeply. And so I have to be careful not to internalize too much of what's going on around me. Um, but I think that when you were talking about the HSPs, like banding together and for a cause, like I think that's why I feel like I'm on the verge of something, because I feel like we all see these things, we notice them, we feel deeply about them. If we are our best selves and we can find one another, then we can maybe start changing these things that happen in the world because people are not kind to one another and they refuse to have empathy for one another. If we can start like infusing society with a little bit of that together, then maybe so many bad things always have to happen and we can make change. So that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of, I don't know if that made any sense, but
It did. Yeah, yeah. I think that's great, and I think you're right. The ability to have that influence, I think, is perhaps the almost like the next step in the personal development adventure. Is it's kind of
Mhm.
like we start with us. And I think
Right.
we start with us, and then through doing what we're doing and living the way we're living, that's when we start to influence those around us.
Yes.
There's that kind of ripple effect, and the more of us that are doing that, then that's really how a movement starts. And I think that's
Yeah.
really awesome that you're kind of recognizing that that's where you'd like to take it. And I think
Mhm.
just one thing I picked up on earlier that you said, and I just wanted to ask you about it, is would you say that the biggest thing that this doing the work has done for you is you said something about I do things differently or I am different and that's okay. Would you say that would be the kind of, in a nutshell, that's the biggest thing that the work has done for you, is giving you permission to be different and be okay with it?
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, like I'm still figuring that out, but when I kind of reflect on my day and the way that I am in the workplace specifically. And I say this, I always come back to work because I was off of work for a year. So there's a very clear separation in my mind for how things were before and how things are now. And so I use work to kind of illustrate that example. I hope and I think that it happens in all the other areas of my life as well, but it's just easier to see, I think, the contrast. Um, I'm not the same as I was. And that's intentional, but it's also unintentional. The way that I am now is a result of internalizing the work that I have done, um, refusing to accept that we all have to be the same and, that the world is each man for himself and really opening up to being who I am as an HSP extrovert and also as a mother and a professional and a wife. Um, it's like doing the work, like with the boundaries. It's not a mental shift. It's not like where I can say, okay, before I was doing this and now I'm going to be doing this and I'm making a decision to do that. It's happening more organically. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, okay, well, let's see where this goes. How can I um, interact with this person and forgetting about expectations around how much time I'm spending with somebody or what I'm saying, if it's the right thing or anything like that, but just being myself is having that effect. So yeah, it's the work has made the shift in me, but I don't see the shift in me. I see it in um, the external, how I
Mm-hmm.
relate to other people in different areas of my life. Did that answer the question?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I
Definitely.
think that's what.
Yeah, and so just on that, have other people noticed a shift in you though? Because as you say, where you notice it is in the things around you. Have other people noticed a shift in you though, or a change?
Well, I hope so. I haven't really asked anybody.
It's okay. I
Um,
just thought I'd ask. And you may
yeah,
not have had
and
the
I'm
opportunity to see enough people to for them to notice. Who knows? But
yeah. Um, so my husband, the conversation we had today was good. He said something like, "I'm finally understanding all the things you've been telling me for the last year." And I'm seeing how you are living this shift, like that, the, for example, the boundaries thing. That wasn't me being cruel or trying to withdraw or being hurtful. It was just like, I told you I was going to do this, and then I did it. And it doesn't change how I feel about you or how much I love you, but it is an example of a change in my behavior as a result of an internal change that I've committed to, and that I feel is necessary and continues to be necessary in order for us to be able to have a healthy relationship, and for me to be healthy in other areas of my life. So I think that was him kind of saying, like, okay, I see the change in you. It's not just all mumbo jumbo, psychobabble. And a couple of the people that I have worked with in the past, when I see them around or I speak to them, they have said, um, wow, you seem so much more confident. You seem so much better. Um, I had somebody tell me that I was living in power. And here I am, like,
Ooh, that's
feeling
nice.
like, yeah, I was like, on the verge of tears, feeling really like weak and sad. And she's like, wow, but these things that are happening, like this is powerful. You are living in your power right now. I can see this. And I was like, whoa, I don't have people tell me stuff like that very often.
That's pretty
So
cool.
those are all, yeah, those are reflections, right? And part of it goes to the fact that maybe I come across stronger than I am, or more stable, or smarter, or whatever. But I think that it's really like kind of the light from inside shining out, even though I haven't quite gotten my head in that space. It's I'm just allowing it to kind of flow more
Mm,
organically in my life, rather than trying to put everything in a box and say, okay, this is how it needs to be all the time.
yeah, and it sounds like the exactly what you just said. The light is shining through, whether you've caught up with the fact that
Yeah.
you're a success or not. The light is speaking for itself, and other people are
Yeah.
starting to notice. I think that's really cool. Yeah, yeah, so good, and so deserved as well. And that's what I think is needs to be said about all these, everybody that I've interviewed this week. You, Terry, Laura, Carol, everybody in Connection Corner, everybody out there who's actually committed to doing the work, it deserves a massive pat on the back, because it's not easy, and
No.
B, it's, well, I don't know what B is, but it's not easy. And B is, that's it, not everybody does it. So there are a lot of
Hmm.
people in the world who just go, well, I am the way I am, and so
Hmm.
be it. And they're not interested in changing. They're not interested in being the best version of themselves. Whereas every single one of you who is doing some work and has committed to doing the work, you're now reaping the rewards, and it's very, very well deserved, I think. And I think hopefully we've helped people watching this see that you don't have to, it doesn't have to take over your life. It can be something that you're just kind
Yeah.
of doing on the side. And because of our Vantage sensitivity, you start to see the benefits, I think, so much sooner
Yeah.
than you perhaps would if you weren't a HSP. So you've got kind of even more reason to do it, because you just get the benefits so much more. And I think that's really, really cool.
Hmm.
Great. Okay, so I suppose we just final thing I wanted to say or ask is, do you have any advice for other HSP extroverts who would like to overcome some of the challenges of either their childhood or being HSP extrovert, and start to see their sensitivity as their superpower?
Well, I think it's important to know that it is work. It's not easy. Excuse me. And one thing I wanted to mention about that is that it's really terrifying. And I think that a lot of people choose not to go down this road because what is your end game? Like, and that was one thing that I really had to um, contemplate initially was, if I do this thing, if I really dig deep and I figure this out and I heal those wounds that I don't even know really are there, what am I going to be like at the end of it? how is that going to affect my relationships that are important to me? And the answer just came out that, well, I will be better. I will create better relationships going forward. And if the relationships that I have now suffer as a result or dissolve because I make myself whole, then those relationships were not um, good to have or good to keep in my life. And so I had to make that decision and say, okay, whatever comes of this is going to be for the good. Um, and I'm willing to put everything on the line with the knowledge that my marriage may dissolve, or I may never speak to my father again, or all these, I may need to leave my job and find a new job. Those are all really terrifying things, but in the end, it's all worth it. And I have hope now, whereas before I couldn't see any hope. I just thought this is my prison that I've made for myself. The other piece of advice that I would have is for HSPs who have had a troubled childhood, a difficult childhood, who have been told that they're worthless or they're wrong, um, and have been treated that way by other people, because they're different or because they're a threat. um, find a way to reconnect with that child, that at some point your little HSP you said, what's happening? I don't understand why I feel this way and why people are acting this way. I don't get it. And reconnect with that child, forgive that child for not having all of the answers at whatever age that child was, because you didn't know what you didn't know, and you were a child. And so for me, that was a big part of it, was just like, well, how could I have been so dumb this whole time? I could have, made different choices in my life if I had realized all these things earlier. But that's a pointless exercise, because I was still a child, and we didn't even know about HSPs when I was a child. So yeah, just find a way to connect with that child, and forgive yourself, and move on, in growth.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody likes Disney movies, my kind of mantra has been this last year, even before I found the group. But then when I did find the group, I thought, okay, this is it. This is the next thing. Um, in the second Frozen movie, Anna sings a song called The Next Right Thing. And it's about how things at that moment in time are really dark. She doesn't know how she's going to keep going. Her motivation in life, she thinks, is gone and is never coming back. And still small voice says, just do the next right thing, and take a step again. Um, and like, oh, I can't even remember the words now. I used to know all the words, but anyway, that's the thing. Just do the next right thing. It doesn't have to be monumental. It doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be the next step.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think that's absolutely beautiful and such a great mantra to have, because you're right. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to commit to transforming your life, for
Yeah.
example. You can
Yeah.
just commit to, okay, well, what's one little thing I can do today or tomorrow, or what's the next right thing? What's the next step that I'm going to take? And that makes it so much less daunting and overwhelming as well.
Yeah.
And what I think hopefully everybody's got from watching these success story series is that sometimes it is only little steps that can actually bring about quite significant shifts for you. And that's, I think, the power of it is you don't have to do these big things all it is about little steps. And guess what? It's almost like they compound over time,
Yeah.
and the changes and the shifts get bigger and bigger because we're just kind of building up these little things. And I think that can
Yeah.
hopefully make it seem a little less daunting for people who are who've perhaps never done anything like this before. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I love that mantra. The next right thing is very
Yeah.
cool. Lovely. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you, everybody who's watching. If you have any questions or comments, or you want to give Melody a high five, please do below. I think it's very brave of all these ladies who've come on and shared their story with us. I'm very grateful to all of them for giving up their time to share their stories. Hopefully I imagine it's been very inspiring and very enjoyable to watch them, and I'm sure you're all kind of applauding them all from your living room or wherever you're watching this from, because I think they all do deserve a round of applause or a pat on the back or whatever. And anybody else out there who's watching this, who's doing the work, then yes, big applause to you guys too, because as Melody said, it's not easy and it can be very terrifying, but if you just do the next right thing, then you're on your way. You're well on your way by doing that. Lovely. All right. Any final thoughts or comments or anything you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so. I just I hope that more HSPs learn about HSPs. Like I just want everybody to know what this is, and not to say like I want everyone to know what this is because I think it's special and a superpower, which I do, but that's not why I want everyone to know. I just want everyone to know so that we can celebrate our differences and realize that there's a place in our community and in our society for non-sensitives and highly sensitives. And that if we use our strengths collectively, then we will be just better and we'll be able to have more meaningful relationships and we'll raise powerful children to lead the next generation. Like, I just think if everybody knew, then we could just, be a little bit more forgiving and graceful. And so, yeah, I just want everyone to know about it.
Yeah, I agree. Yep, thank you for sharing that. And that's pretty much why we're here doing this. And
Yeah.
for those who are a part of this, thank you for being part of the very first HSP Extrovert Awareness Week. And it is something that I would really love to do every year. And my goal is that it gets bigger and bigger every year so that we can reach more and more people. And there's kind of, I suppose, two ways to reach people. One is to reach other HSP extroverts, so we can kind of bring them into our fold and we can nurture them and we can support them and we can help them. But also it's about, as you say, educating the non-sensitives about who we are so that it just increases understanding, it increases awareness so that we can all learn to, I suppose, coexist and use each other's strengths, as you were saying, because society can only benefit from increased education and increased awareness. So yeah, so please, everybody who's watching this, look out for next year, because I do want to run it again next year. I think I aim to do it maybe in November every year, just so that everybody knows when it's on. But yeah, so invite your friends, invite your family, and yeah, let's make it an even bigger celebration next year. So thanks again, Melody. I'm going to
Hi, thank
stop
you.
the live
Thanks for having
stream
me.
now. All right. See you everybody soon.